To welcome you tonight to our Zoom parent forum focused on how we will be reopening school and returning to school. Let me start just by saying thank you. There's about 115 people. I'm anticipating more will be joining us, but we really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come to listen and to submit questions. I know many of you have submitted questions. And we're interested and hopeful that we're able to, number one, get questions answered for you. So we had over 800 questions that were submitted. And then what we did is we actually formulated a presentation trying to answer as many of those as possible. So one purpose is to try to get to those questions, but sort of the second bigger overarching goal of the meeting is to help you feel more comfortable and have confidence in how we're reopening schools. So with that said, like I mentioned, as you registered for this, you all submitted questions. And in addition to that, we've been collecting questions. So there's many people who've emailed and shared questions with some of our parent liaisons. And one of our key parents, Cassie Dunn, who was really helpful in terms of collecting and organizing questions for us. And like I said, we designed this presentation in an effort to really get ahead and front load and answer some of those questions. The three areas that really most everything connected to in terms of themes was COVID testing and contact tracing, cleaning, masking, and distancing, and instructional models. So you'll see the way the presentation flows is we will cover a section and then we'll take some questions. We'll cover another section and then take some live questions, and so on through the three sections. In order to ask a live question, you need to use the raise your hand button down at the bottom. It's along the bar at the bottom of your screen. So that's how we'll be selecting people to answer those questions. In terms of just a little bit more context before we get into content, and we're trying to just take feedback from the last couple of sessions that we've had and make sure that we sort of go a little bit faster so that we have more time for questions. But from a context perspective, it's important to know a couple of things. One, we've had a team who's been working on everything COVID since closure. That team is comprised of folks from all over our system in terms of every department, with the idea that we work really importantly as a team, and really it's important to see the overlap and how we impact each other. So we've been working really closely on a daily basis since March, and then have gone from sort of a COVID response team and really shifted into a reopening task force. And then that reopening task force has grown as well. So we have over 150 stakeholders, part of our reopening task force and subcommittees now. I know with the school committees opening and meeting, that number really has gone up to more like 300. So we're trying to make sure that we're including stakeholders and voice along the way. It's important to also know, though, that as we're making decisions, taking feedback, and answering questions, much of what we're confined by is the guidance that we've received. So as you know, or most of you know, we received guidance in mid-July from the State Education Department in terms of some reopening guidance and guidelines, and also the Department of Health and the Monroe County Department of Health. Those documents are really important because we have to comply. There's pieces to that really end up dictating decisions, some of the decisions that we have to make, because in order to be able to reopen, we have to be able to sort of assure the state of certain things. So, and I'll reference that throughout the presentation. So what you see here is some guiding principles. It was important to us as we were coming together and making really important decisions about the health and safety of our kids and the health and safety of our staff that we really anchor into some key ideas. So as a group, these are the things that we have anchored into in terms of decision making. So we're committed to bringing back as many students as possible, as safely as possible, using the guidance from the State Education Department and the Department of Health. Just that idea that we want our kids back. We just need to make sure that we do it in a way that's in compliance. We will prioritize and grease the idea of high quality, equitable teaching and learning experiences. We know the spring did not feel good for everybody. We know that everyone didn't have the greatest teaching and learning experience, and we want to make sure that we improve upon that. We have prioritized attending to the social emotional needs of our students, to being consistent but not rigid as a system. So we're large, and sometimes inconsistency or difference can be confusing to parents. So we're trying to make sure we're as consistent as possible. And then also a commitment to two-way communication with stakeholders, just the idea that it's not just us sharing a lot of information, but how are we listening and how are we getting feedback from parents, students, and staff around what these plans look like, and to meeting their needs. Some of the guidelines for tonight that I'd ask us to think about is just and be aware of is we're being recorded. So this is being recorded. It's going to be about a 60-minute session, and it will be posted to the website. There'll be time for some Q&A, some live questions like I mentioned, and you'll have to use your raise the hand feature. We ask you to stay on mute just so that it doesn't disrupt the meeting or so that people can hear. And then lastly, and most importantly, really just this idea that we are a community that are working really hard together with the whole idea of doing right by our kids and staff. So we ask that this be as respectful as possible and supportive. We know we need help and need to be partners with our parents. So we're looking to you for questions, we're looking to you for suggestions, we're looking for you to partner and help us and assist, because this is a task that no one ever anticipated, and it's much bigger and more complex than anything that we've ever done as a school district. What you'll see here is some of the folks on the line. So these are some of the key people, as I talked about our subgroups and our committees that have worked on reopening. These are key people that have led subcommittee work. So they are people who, for example, Dave Richardson has been the lead with transportation. He's pulling stakeholders together in that respect, and then getting feedback and working on a lot of the plans related to that. And the same thing applies for all of the other folks mentioned on this. And I apologize for not introducing everybody, but I want to make sure that we have time. So if you want to reference this actually slide will be up on the site. So if you're looking for a key person in a particular area, there's some names there that could help you. And then we're going to get started right on with the presentation. So these three areas that I identified that we said the questions all really sort of bucketed, or we created these themes. The first one that we're going to start with tonight is about instructional models. So the instructional aspect of a hybrid model, with the idea of what is a hybrid model and what is remote teaching, is something that's new for many of us. So what I'm going to ask is Todd Smith, who's one of our executive directors for instruction, I'm going to have him, because he was the key facilitator for this subcommittee, talk to us about the recommendations that have been made with this. And then what we'll do after each section, like I said, we'll stop and then we'll take some questions. So I'm going to turn it right over to him to talk to you for a few minutes.
Thank you, Kathy. So just starting off for our remote learning students, just some assurances we want to guarantee you. At the K-12 level, all students will have a Chromebook. So I know going into this year, not everybody at some of the early grades had a Chromebook, but we will be providing a rollout plan for that, and when you can be picking those up. So that is the schedule for that is being finalized as we speak. And then daily attendance, one of the shifts again from the spring is there's going to be more accountability. So there's going to be daily attendance, there's going to be grades and some of those kinds of things. So it's going to be a little bit of a shift in mindset from what we had in the spring. And then as always, we're going to continue to provide IEP programs and services, and Stacy Brindisi will be speaking to that in a little while. And just a reminder for that, the remote learning option, when you opt into fully remote, that is for a semester at a time. If we go to the next slide, we can see a little more details at the elementary level. So for the hybrid learning option, for the students who are going to be in person and remote, and then this kind of crosses over to our fully remote students as well, there's going to be a blend of live classes and sessions and independent learning and work time. So the day is going to be broken up through a variety of those things. So your students would be attending 2 days a week if they're hybrid. And then the other days they'll have a variety of those remote experiences. And so one of the great things compared to the spring is we have a little more time now to do some training. So our teachers are going to have some time at the start of the year to dive in and learn some of the new tech tools. Because as Kathy mentioned, this is new for all of us, right? We're completely shifting the model of instruction. and education that we've had for forever, right? So we have now built in some more time at the start of the year and some of those ongoing Wednesday times for teachers to continue to learn some of these tools. So we are going to see, some differences as we go through the fall as teachers continue to build their skill set and tool chest. Students will be checking in on days they're not in school because attendance is required now. So that's just another layer that's going to feel a little bit different. And Wednesdays, there is going to be a check-in for everybody, and this is K through 12, but it's going to be focused on community building. It's going to be a short little window, and then the rest of the day, students will be focused on asynchronous assignments that their teachers will have there for them, because the teachers will spend the bulk of the day training and learning and collaborating to provide the great lessons and experiences for your students. If we go look at the secondary level, some of the feedback we got from parents is they wanted some more structures for their kids. And so what we're asking is that students actually follow the block schedule, whether they are in person or remote. They should be following a similar schedule to provide that structure for them, because we all need those routines, and especially our children do, to follow, to begin to build time to do their work and just some of those equitable experiences for kids. So they will be asked to check in at the start of each block with their teachers, and get their assignments and work and have different check-ins with their teachers throughout the day. If you shift to that PDF, Mike, so tomorrow we will be releasing a parent handbook, and these are just a little sneak preview of a few of the pages, but you'll be seeing more details tomorrow with these. So another piece of feedback we got from parents was more consistency in communication. So a lot of teachers were using a variety of tools, so we're trying to narrow that in. And as you see at pre-K through 2, we're encouraging Seesaw to be the tool for communication. And at 3 through 12, assignments will be posted in Google Classroom. And if you say like, hey, I don't know how to use that, we know. So we are providing a series of trainings and tutorials out there for parents, for students, and for staff on how to use these tools so we can get some more of that consistency. And if we go to the next page, we can see just a little bit more details around some of what an elementary day might look like. So you might have like a morning meeting live check-in for in-person and remote students. And then there might be some asynchronous assignments for kids to work on. And then some additional check-ins and live learning conferences where a student might be working on their independent reading, and then they might have a short little conference with their teacher to talk about like what are their goals when they're reading and some of those types of things. Or during their RTI time, there might be some short times where, hey, we're meeting with our teachers to ask questions and get instructional support. So those are going to break up the day a little bit, and then there'll be asynchronous experiences broken throughout. And then when you look at the secondary, we talked about them following a more consistent schedule. So this is what that might actually look like. You see on Monday, I'm in person going to living environment period 1. The next day when I'm home and remote, I'd be still going period 1. I'd just be logging in remotely. So trying to get that consistency for students. And even if I'm fully remote, now I'm just doing the same thing on Monday and Tuesday. I'm logging into that class remotely. And there'll be grades at the secondary level and attendance, and just more of that accountability built in, and time to meet with teachers to get instructional supports and some of those types of things. So that's an overview. I'm going to pass it on to our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Stacy Brindisi, to get into some of our IAP and related services.
Thanks, Todd. Good evening. That slide where we talk a little bit about IEP and related services provision will be provided to all students really just sums it up. So our school district is responsible for implementing IEPs, really to the extent reasonable in consideration of the health and safety of our students and staff. So, given that the CSC has recommended all of our IEPs be delivered over 5 days of school, that's how we typically do business. We're going to have to be flexible in the implementation. So our superintendent has prioritized in-person services for our students who are enrolled in self-contained classrooms. Those students will be coming 4 days a week. Our other special ed students will come like all other students 2 days a week in that hybrid model. And of course, we have some students who will be 100% remote based on parent choice. So at the beginning of the school year, what we'll really do is every student has a program manager. That person will reach out to each family, and we've really committed to engaging with families and partnering to determine whatever that plan looks like that makes the most sense. So there will be a variety of live in-person services, and there will be some asynchronous opportunities. It really will depend on what works for most families. So we'll be working on that as the school year opens, but we will be implementing IEPs to the best of our ability given the circumstances. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Zaffitz. I'm one of the assistant superintendents here in Greece for educational services. As Kathy mentioned at the top, we're going to take some questions at the conclusion of every section. So we've arrived at the end of section 1 on instructional models. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand feature. If you have a question, we'll take a couple now, and then we want to make sure that we get through all of the content. So we'll go to the next section. We probably won't get to every question, but we'll get to as many as we can. The one thing that I'll ask is that the questions are, this is a district presentation, so if we could try to keep the question to district level questions, and any school specific questions that you have, there is a school meeting for each building next week. That would be a great place to ask those questions. So I'll try to keep them to the district level if we can. And also, if you could make sure that your microphone is ready to go. We had a couple issues earlier in the week with folks on a desktop who weren't able to unmute. So just a couple logistics there, and we'll hop right into the questions with Cassie Maloney. Good evening, Cassie. Do you have a question? If you could unmute.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, I just am wondering if my child gets IEP services, right? And he goes to school for 2 days a week and then he's home 3 days. He's really going to miss a lot of instructional time to get his services. How is that going to be handled to make sure that they stay equipped with their services and their learning?
Yeah, Cassie, I'm gonna have Stacy field the. Hi, Cassie. By the way, I'm glad you're on, and I'm gonna have Stacy field that question.
Hi, Kathy. So what we're really looking at is that individualized plan. So on those days where kids are not in school, what we will look at is really the first thing we're going to do is regroup when we get back to school. And we're really going to look at where every student is functioning because they've been out of school for so long. So once we regroup with teams, we'll talk about what that service delivery really looks like on those off days. So there might be some live connect times. There might be some support that students do independently and then check back in via an office hours. It really is going to depend on what the student needs. We're required to report on students' annual goals and really look at how we are monitoring their progress as we move through this closure, right? So things are going to be unique. We're going to have to be flexible, but we're going to be in it together to figure out how we best support given the circumstances, knowing the resources we have available and the capacity we have in our buildings right now until we can get all kids back. How do we support all of our kids to the best of our ability with the tools that we have? And that's really going to be that individualized conversation with the program manager for those off days, what those services might look like when your child isn't in school.
Thanks,
Did
Dave.
that answer your question?
We're going to, Christina Mulhern has our next question. So Christina, go ahead.
I have a question. So my son receives services, counseling service outside of school. It's I don't know the name of it. They come into school. Have we heard anything? Because she hasn't heard how that's going to work yet.
So it's my understanding, so our partnerships with like Genesee.
Yes.
I think all those partnerships are still intact. And then what we're going to be working on with them is just, trying to line up schedules. There's going to be some work to do in terms of making sure that they're in on the days. So there'll be a little bit of front loaded work, but it's my understanding that our partnerships are still intact and will continue.
Thank you. Let's go now to Roxanne S. Roxanne S., if you want to unmute and ask a question.
Hi, I just want to get some clarity. Oh, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to get some clarity that kindergartners will receive a Chromebook even with the hybrid learning, and will they be expected to bring them in or keep them at home?
So yes, all students will be receiving a Chromebook, and part of our trainings this year will be, if you're in a hybrid student, bringing that device back and forth so it can be utilized in both learning environments. students. So that's going to be, we know, challenging and work that we have to do. As all kindergartners, that first few months is a lot of routine building and training them on classroom and learning expectations. So we know that will take a little while, but yes, all students will be receiving a Chromebook.
All right, let's go next to Jaminda Weirin. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Ask a question. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Hi, I wanted to know when schedules will be sent out. Do we still get schedules?
Yes, you're gonna get schedules. We're hoping to have all schedules to parents by September 4th. We know that that's late, and we're expecting that we probably will be able to get them sooner to most. But we don't want to basically say that because we're not sure we can actually promise that with depending on the schedules. And some of the things that are sort of still changing on a regular basis. So by September 4th, everybody should have a schedule.
All right, next question. We got time for one, maybe two more for section one. Let's go to Rella. Rella, you have a question? If you want to unmute. Rella, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
My son is in Womoco this year, and there's been no clear plan of how that's going to work. So what is the plan for Womoco as far as in-person and online? And are we going to be getting some more information from BOCES, or are we getting information from the district?
Great question, Rella. They're going to follow the same schedule as us. So they're doing a hybrid as well. So I don't have an answer to you in terms of like in your particular situation, what days. Is it your son? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, you're on mute. Either way, you're going to get information from both of us. But what I want you to know in terms of the Womoco is that they are also in a hybrid model. So it's going to follow the same way in terms of the 2 days a week. And you'll be getting clarification and information from both us and from BOCES.
All right, let's go to the last question for section one. Those of you who have your hands who didn't get a chance, be sure to circle back at the end. Irina Strauss. Irina Strauss, are you there? All right, let's move on then. Let's go to Sarah Brown. Hopefully I said that correctly. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
I'm just seeing a lot of stuff for like kindergarten and up, and I'm just wondering if plans have been sort of finalized for what preschool is going to look like.
There has been a lot of work for preschool. So I'm not sure if Val is on the line. I know that she's worked closely with our pre-K folks, which the pre-K program is just naturally going to look a little bit different because developmentally their age and thinking about screen time and device. But is Val on tonight?
She's here, Kathy. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I can't see everybody's picture, so I apologize.
Go ahead, Val.
Yes, good evening. Yes, we are working with our pre-K teachers to determine what exactly that is going to look like for our pre-K students. They will be attending, in the hybrid way. They will not be doing anything as far as we're not providing devices for our pre-K students because we don't think that that's developmentally appropriate. There may be some online things that students can do if parents have devices at home and maybe doing that. But really and truly, it's about getting our children, our youngest kiddos into school, having some exposure to what that looks like. And what our challenge is going to be is how we're going to be providing the social distancing and sort of some of those hands-on activities, which we know is so important to our youngest learners, and being able to do that in a way with materials that is safe. And so that's what we've been spending a lot of time doing, making sure that, we don't have as many of those sort of communal activities that we do typically with our pre-K kiddos. So those are some of the things that we've been working on with our pre-K teachers.
And I would also, it's a great question that I'm hoping that people also participate in their school session, because the school session will also have teachers as representatives, and they can talk more about like some of the more specific things they've talked about as teams to get more nitty gritty in terms of what that'll look like.
All right, thanks for those questions. We're going to move on to section 2, and then at the end of this section, we'll go through a similar process and take questions. Kathy?
Yep, so this next section is on testing, screening, and contact tracing. So Mary Kay Perello, our medical director, and myself and many others have worked really hard around trying to sift through the questions. We're working really closely with the director of health, the Department of Health here in Monroe County. And what we've done here is, again, just try to take all the frequently asked questions, and we've got some answers for you. So I'll move through these, but I'm anticipating there's a lot more questions that you may have. So the first thing that I want to make sure people are clear about is that we will be doing health screens. So we are asking families, and we are asking families to take responsibility for health screens. So just this bigger idea that we have this social contract that exists now with COVID, where we're promising that we're not walking to Wegmans sick, we're not going places if we have symptoms, et cetera. The same thing is true for school. So we're going to be asking parents to sign off, basically saying that their child doesn't have a fever and isn't showing symptoms. And that sign off is basically a promise to us saying that you're not going to send them with any of those symptoms. So that would happen before coming to school. The CDC and our Department of Health have been really clear that that should be happening at home. So I just stress that piece. We don't want them on the bus. We don't want to find out that they're sick once they got to school. We really want that to be happening at home. I want to be clear, the second bullet is just talking about we will not be doing COVID-19 testing on our school campuses. That is something that there was some media attention and confusion because I think in some parts of the state and nation, they are doing that. That isn't something at this point that we are. So I just want to make sure people know that we're not going to be doing that to your children. The third bullet talks about just what happens if a student comes in, maybe they're feeling well, and then they start to exhibit symptoms during the day. So essentially what would happen, and that happens all the time in schools. So a kid comes in, they feel fine, you send them off on the bus, they get to school, and then maybe they come down with a fever, a cough, sore throat, you name it. What we would be doing is they would go to the nurse like normal. So we're working hard with our teachers and staff around really being more mindful and paying attention to symptoms so that we send them immediately if we notice this. But the nurse would essentially evaluate, and then they would isolate the students from others. So in every school, there's a space identified where a student can be isolated. They wouldn't be sitting alone. But they would be away so that there wasn't a worry about infecting others. The parent or guardian would be called and asked to pick the student up as soon as possible. And what we would be doing is working directly with that parent or guardian around next steps. The idea that at that point, because they're being sent home from school, we really need the parent to be following up with a doctor. So the Department of Health has been very clear. If a student comes down and is sent home from school with symptoms, in order to return, they will need documentation from a doctor, and they will need a negative COVID test and to be symptom free. So that is what would happen if a child, at this point, according to the guidance that's written, and that's not us picking that or deciding that, that's actually DOH stuff. That would be the way that we would have to follow up. And again, we would be working with the family around making sure that they had access, helping them if they didn't have access to healthcare. If there's other barriers, we would try to help the family. But essentially, it's pretty rigorous and it's pretty restrictive right now in terms of how to get back to school, which is a bit concerning for me because I want our kids in school. I mean, I obviously want them well, but I also don't want kids to be out longer than they need to be. You can see there that last bullet just again reiterates exactly what's on the Department of Health guidance around how do you return to school. Go to the next slide. If a student tests positive, this gets even a little bit more complicated. If a student tests positive, we basically as a school district are sort of out of it. And I don't mean that we don't care or we're not connected, but the lead agency now becomes the Department of Health. So the Department of Health would be the people that would be in charge of contact tracing. They would be reaching out to us as a school district to find out and talk to people, anybody connected to that student. They would be reaching out to you as a family to figure out and trace, find out where that student was or who's connected in the family. And they would be making decisions and determinations around who needs to be isolated or quarantined and for how long, or who needs to be tested, etc. So they're the lead agent when it comes to that. It's not going to be our nurse at school. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. The other thing that I've been clear about with people is what's happening, and because people have tested positive in the county and the area, what is happening typically when someone tests positive is the person finds out first. So one of the things we're going to be working on is a really clear communication where how do you make sure if you are like, if I'm the parent and my student is positive, who do I call? How do I let the school know? How do I make sure the Department of Health knows? Because they may not be the first people that are calling. And it's important to me as superintendent in the district that we know right away, because I want to be able to follow protocols with the Department of Health and make sure we're doing everything accurately and perfectly. The Department of Health will most likely, if we have a positive, what they have said, they will most likely close that classroom down for at least 24 hours, but they have the right to close down a school. They could close down just a classroom or two. And they could do that for 24 hours, but they also could decide they need longer, and that could lead into something longer. I share that with you because there's going to be more, we'll be creating more like clear communication around what to do in this situation. And it'll probably look more like a flow chart or a visual that'll be easier to follow. And we're trying to create something that is a bit more consistent around Monroe County, so that it's easier to follow. I also just want to say and recognize that leaves you as parents in a really difficult position. So I know we always are worried, like when we send our kids off, when you get the call that you have to go pick your child up, there is potential at any point to get a call where you have to go pick your child up. And there may be potential where you get a call saying a classroom is closing down. So I just want parents to realize that and recognize that we really empathize with the hardship that puts on you. But there's not a lot that we can do in that. I just want to make sure people are aware. A question around what could shut us down and move us to full remote has come up. I've said essentially the governor has been clear around positivity or infection rate. So if that was to rise significantly, and he used 9% as a gauge, that could move us to full remote. The governor could decide really at any point he's going to move us to full remote. That he made clear in the spring. So, and my guess is that would obviously be connected to rates in the county. And then the other piece that I have concerns about that I just have to say are concerns around staffing. Because, I've talked a lot about being pretty short across the county with transportation, with bus drivers. We're short with substitute teachers across the area. So if we have issues with infection rate or faculty who are out, and we don't have enough people to actually man and teach in schools, that could also be a problem for us in terms of being able to stay open. And then the last question that came up repeatedly is what would get us back to full time? And I've said to people, I don't have a good answer to this. Unfortunately, no one has answered this question. And I said my Pollyanna answer is that what would bring us back to full time in my mind and my hope is that we bring kids back into this hybrid model and show what an amazing job we can do. We can actually do this very safely. We can do it while also maintaining good rates across the county and the state. And I think if we're able to do that, which I have a lot of confidence in the plans that I've seen, particularly from Monroe County, that if we're able to keep our rates at a good steady rate, that they might relieve restrictions and that would allow us to then bring more students to school. So that's in my hopeful world.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Let's go through the same exercise for questions on section 2. If you have a question, raise your hand in the bottom of your screen and we'll get to as many as we can. So let's start with Williams. Go ahead, Williams.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
my daughter, like, she gets like allergies and her eyes water and she shows symptoms and sometimes she may get a fever. Is that going to be something that's going to be a constant thing that they're going to send her home? Because like all of us, we do work. So it's like, that's going to be like a big load on us.
So allergies are great. That's a really good question and one that's pretty common. So in an example like that, that's going to be really important for you to make sure that you've talked to the nurse in advance. So we do not want to send kids home for like a typical symptom like allergies. And if the nurse is aware of that, that's going to be really, really important because, and the teacher too, because then that's going to be just come the norm. My daughter, I use the example, had a runny nose. I mean, literally a runny nose and chafed lip for about 4 months every winter. So I would not want her sent home. That would be silly to do that. So some of that is going to be you connecting with the nurse ahead of time so that we're aware of any pre-existing things that might be or that might show or concern somebody that are really not anything to worry about. We would work directly with you on that.
All right, let's go to Cassie Maloney. Cassie, do you have a question for us?
Hi, yes, I was just wondering if you received any answers back as if the kids would need a COVID test if you called them in because they weren't feeling good.
Thank you.
In order to come back to school. Or I also read an article that basically if they miss any days, no matter what, that they would need a negative COVID test to return back to school. So I'm just trying to get some clarification on that.
Yeah. So Cassie, right now, and that's a really good question. It's probably, and I was going to add that to the presentation because it's come up so much. So right now, the way that the guidance reads is if a student is sent home from school by a nurse, so that's a medical professional, that is when they're required to get the test and the documentation from a doctor. If I decide I'm going to keep my child home, which we're asking people to be more vigilant about that and more strict almost, where we might normally send a kid like not sure, we're asking people to be really cautious. So if I keep my child home and let's just say they have a sore throat, and then the next day they resolve. So it lasts a day or two and then they seem better. What we're asking you to do as parents is just be in touch with your pediatrician. Oftentimes pediatricians don't even want to see a kid on the first day. I know mine would tell me, nope, give it another day. If the child resolves naturally and they're fine, it's okay to send them back. That's according to the guidance that I have at this point. So I think that what that does for me is it's a good sort of like if I'm a parent, I'm going to be more likely, I would be smarter to keep my kid home just to check on them rather than send them and have them be sent home and then have to go through the rigmarole of a test. Now, having said that, keeping them home, we want to make sure that before parents send them home, they're symptom free or send them back to school, sorry, that they're symptom free and they're feeling well and that they have confidence. And that's where that attestation and kind of going through those symptoms each day is going to be helpful.
All right, let's go to John Sowers. John, do you have a question for us?
I do. As to the concern over whether you run into issues with staffing and teachers, is that going to be a grade level thing or a school or a district thing? So say at Pine Brook, you ran into a shortage of first grade teachers. Would you look at that in terms of maybe we can't have first grade at Pine Brook, or would it shut the school down, or would that be a district decision?
I don't think we would ever shut down a specific grade or classroom like that. I bring that up as sort of a bigger issue. So what I would be looking at as a district is we'll be looking at sort of absenteeism in terms of, and again, we're asking teachers to do the same thing. So I share this because I think it's important in the same way that we're asking you to be really cautious about sending children. We're asking teachers to not come to work if they're showing any symptoms either. So at this point, it's hard because we don't know what that's going to do to the subsystem. We don't know because it's not just us in Greece, it's everybody all over the county. We also know many of our subs are not going to be on the sub list because they're taking care of their own children because of hybrid models or remote models that they've engaged in, and or many of them are retired. So I think we have to sort of see what happens to the system in terms of the impact. But we would be looking at, there would be a lot of things that we would do to try to even out a particular, if there was a grade level or particular issue at a school, and that we've already thought of a lot of things that we're doing proactively and preventatively. But if it becomes a bigger issue around the county, I think that would be when that might be an impact or a piece that goes into not being able to do this.
All right, let's take one more question on section 2. Let's go to Kaboki Brown. I hope I said that right. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Question is regarding returning. If I choose to instead have my kids go completely remote, right now they are going to be going 2 days. Do I have the option of switching back and forth? I heard earlier that it's a semester by semester thing.
Yeah, so if you start in the hybrid model, so this is what we've asked people to do, is to commit to this semester, and that's mainly for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons instructionally and like management wise and safety wise that it is better. If you start off in a hybrid though, and you make a decision, so what, like I used the example with someone not long ago, because let's just say I start with hybrid and 2 months in, like I hate it for whatever reason. It's not working, or I really love the remote days and I just feel like that's going to be more consistent and better. So I want to shift. You can do that. So let's just say it's October and you decide to do that. We are allowing parents to shift out to remote. We're just asking that you commit to that until the end of that semester. So the idea now, let's play it out. If I decided to go to remote and then in November, I decided I wanted to go back in, what we're saying is we can't have you go back and forth. We're asking you just, if you make that decision at one point, stick with it until the end of the semester.
All right, thank you for those questions. Let's move into section 3.
So section 3 is, and I'm going to move pretty quickly through this because we've got a couple people from the district from facilities that have some better information than me. They're like experts in a lot of this. So I'm going to go through some pieces and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris Luther and Kirk Keller, who can help with clarifying some of the most common questions that we've gotten. So the first piece that I want people to be aware of is the bus. So Mike, can you go to the next slide? So on the bus, we're reducing capacity. So similar to the hybrid model, we're reducing. So you're going to have probably about 22 kids on a bus, but siblings can be together. Kids will be required to wear face masks on the bus the whole time. The buses will be disinfected after every run. So the bus drivers are going to help us with that in between runs. That is definitely going to happen. With more intense cleaning done weekly or on long weekends and school recesses. That's when they'll go in and they'll use different products and do more of like what we're would characterize as a deeper clean. Sanitizer can be brought on the bus. It can't be used on the bus. So it actually is, that's a law. So kids may be bringing it in their backpack to bring into their classroom. It just can't be used on the bus. So just some clarification. In school, in terms of social distancing, you're going to see classrooms that have there's a range between 8 and 13. You probably in some classes could get up to 14 depending on square footage. So that point is just, I want people to realize that there's a range. So if you hear your child has 13, there's not like a 12 limit. It really has to do with square footage, and our architect has actually map that all out for our classrooms in every school so that we know exactly how many students can really be in there and appropriately social distance. Masks will be recommended at all times. They must be worn in hallways, cafeterias, and common spaces. When kids are in classrooms, though, they will be given breaks. So masking breaks are mandatory. So we're going to be working with schools, principals, and teachers around where and when do those masking breaks fit in the best. We use the example in the elementary, when kids are social distance and they're independently reading, that would be a great time for them to be able to take a break and bring their mask down. So we're going to be really reasonable about that and logical, but we want to make sure that it just makes sense with what's happening in the classroom, and we'll be working with that with the school and the administrators. There'll be cleaning that happens throughout the day. Chris Luther is going to talk a little bit about what that day will look like in a minute. So I'm going to go right on to the next slide. Ventilation, the one piece, Kirk Keller is going to talk about ventilation. Those are the two areas. So I've asked them both to speak in just a minute. Ventilation is another question that you hear over and over and over again. Our ventilation systems, our air handlers, meet or exceed SED requirements. Kurt will give you much more detailed information, but I feel really comfortable and confident that what we have is perfectly adequate for our system and for our kids in terms of safety and health. Hand sanitizing stations have been installed at different spots throughout schools, and dividers have been added in some areas to aid with social distancing. In addition to that, directional signage has been added. So that will help with traffic flow in hallways and just spacing in terms of where kids might wait, for example, on a lunch line and things like that. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's being done right now with school teams so that it makes sense. My one point that I would add with this is I want people to really be aware and like cognizant of what it's going to look like. So I think in many places, particularly in the elementary, you're going to see much more controlled social distancing because kids are little and teachers, have them walk a certain way in line and so on. When you get to the secondary buildings, we are going to have passing time, even though we have half the amount of kids and we're reducing the amount of passing times. You're still going to have passing time with a lot of kids in the hallway. What we are going to focus on for that from a safety perspective is making sure kids are wearing masks. And also we're going to have adults out to help with just making sure kids go quickly. Passing times, if you're talking about 3 to 5 minutes with a group, you're going to be just fine. We don't want kids congregating. We don't want kids standing out there for longer amounts of time. But I think the pictures that have come out from Georgia and other places, they're alarming, but I do expect that we're going to see some amount of grouping in the hallway. I think for us, though, we're going to, the idea of masking and also having them move quickly is going to be our focus. And I'm going to just turn it over. So Chris Luther is going to talk to you right now for a little bit about the cleaning protocols and some of those pieces, because those were a real common question.
Thank you, Kathy. So I'll speak to the task custodial team will be working on every day and performing in our schools, and Kurt will speak to the ventilation concerns. But facility operations in collaboration with district reopening teams establish cleaning and disinfection procedures which follow CDC, Monroe County, and state guidance. The highlight of the procedures will be frequent cleaning and disinfecting of the high touch surfaces throughout the day, frequent bathroom fixture cleaning throughout the day, complete disinfection each and every night as we always have done. Cafeteria tables will be cleaned between lunch periods and disinfected at the end of each day. Classrooms will continue to be cleaned, vacuumed, and or mopped as they always have, and disinfected. And the seating, the desktops and tabletops, they'll be wiped down frequently between classes and between cohorts. Common areas, they'll be attended to throughout the day, wiped down as needed. Water sources, a lot of questions about drinking fountains. They will be operational. Where we have bottle fills, it's preferred that students bring a water bottle, but we will be making sure drinking sources are clean and disinfected. On Wednesday days off and over the weekends, we'll do a more thorough cleaning and disinfection of all areas students and staff are using. Custodial staff in every building will have a cleaning and disinfection log that they'll be required to maintain. And what will help and students will notice that soft surface materials will be removed from classrooms. That's area carpets, upholstered furniture, beanbag chairs, and stuffed toys and things like that. But most of all, frequent hand washing is a primary source of preventing the spread of germs. And as Kathy said, where water and soap is not available, there will be hand sanitizer stations throughout the buildings. And that's all I have right now.
Thanks, Chris. Kurt, will you talk to us a little bit about ventilation? Give us the down and dirty.
Sure, I can. At Greece Central, we're fortunate that many of our systems have been updated or replaced over the last several years through our capital improvement projects. And all of our systems, whether new or not replaced, do meet SED requirements for ventilation. With that being said, we did meet with our planning department and discuss ways we could increase ventilation beyond what is required. A few of the ways we're going to do that: our building occupancy, the amount of people in the building has been decreased significantly due to the planned hybrid learning model. Reduced occupants in a space means increased ventilation per occupant with no changes to the current ventilation. Secondly, building occupancy demand ventilation software will be disabled in all rooms that are scheduled during the occupancy periods. Some rooms have occupancy sensors that detect movement and adjust ventilation when rooms are not occupied. This feature will be disabled during scheduled occupancy periods to maintain set ventilation regardless of room occupancy. Third, building management system scheduled occupancy will be extended longer to increase ventilation air changes per day at each site. Greece will increase the scheduled occupancy periods of each building to increase the runtime of ventilation equipment. In addition, there's been questions about filters. All air filters in Greece Central meet current SED and equipment manufacturer specifications for proper equipment operation. And similarly, questions were asked about propping doors and windows. No fire rated doors can be propped open per New York State Fire Code. Some doors do have automatic door holds that will release during a fire, during a fire alarm, and will be maintained open. Most of the doors in a school building are fire rated. And windows can be opened as needed with no change to any district policy. And that's really the summary of ventilation.
Thanks, Kurt. Before we get to the questions, we do have one area that wasn't addressed in too much detail that we did get a bunch of questions about. So I'm going to ask, it's for our food service. So I'm going to ask Paul Palmer, our food service director, to talk a little bit about what to expect with regards to food service when we get back to school.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off by saying that same-day breakfast and lunch will be available to both in-school students and remote learners every day, Monday through Friday. So to address the students that will be in school, those students will be receiving breakfast from both serving lines and satellite kiosks spread throughout the buildings. In-school students will be receiving their lunches through the serving lines. However, the serving lines will be altered to make sure that we can accommodate social distancing. When the kids go through the line, it'll look different. All the food is going to be served, capped, or wrapped. There will no longer be any self-service, especially those of unprotected items. Hand washing prior to and after lunches is required, along with masking and frequent sanitizing. All transactions will be touchless and cashless. We're already set up for this with our student IDs at the secondary schools, as they have barcodes on them that can be scanned. And at our elementary level, the cashiers have touch screens where they can utilize that at that level for the kids at the elementaries. Unfortunately, the number of menu options are going to be reduced. We're doing that to help speed of service and help minimize congestion. However, let your kids know that we are building our menus around those items that we know are their student favorites. Both cafeterias and classrooms will be used where students will actually eat their meals. It will depend on the building, because each building's configured a little bit different, because we want to make sure that we can ensure social distancing. Remote or hybrid learners, same-day breakfast and lunch will be available for pickup at each student's home school. We do this to ensure allergy safety and provide the appropriate portion sizes and nutritional values by student age group. Timeframes are yet to be finalized, but breakfast and lunch, the time where we will be distributing those meals may be a little different by building, but you can anticipate it will be after we have served breakfast to the in-school students and before we start serving lunch to the in-school students. There will be a period of time available for parents and guardians to come pick up those meals if they want to participate. Exterior doors adjacent to the cafeteria will be used as pickup locations. Parents will not need to enter the building more than a few feet to receive their meals. We are in the process of finalizing our online pre-order process. Doing so will allow parents to pre-order, and it'll give food service an opportunity to know that we can prepare for an adequate number of meals to be available on that day. Unlike the free meals program we've been operating since March, in September, parents will need to provide the name of the child the meal is being provided for at the time of pickup. But most importantly, which has been the theme throughout, this is new for us as well. So we are prepared to make necessary adjustments as we move forward. And I just want everybody to know that as well. But that's what I have. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Paul. So I want to be sensitive to time. I know that we said we were going to end at 7. We will extend tonight's forum until 10 after for questions. But Kathy, if you want to wrap the content portion, maybe we can let folks who have to put their kids to bed or whatever get off the line. And then those who can stick around for questions will stick around until about 10 after.
Sure. Sure. I would just, in terms of sort of wrapping things up, I'm going to start really with what Paul started with. I mean, the whole point of us having forums and the point of us getting questions is so that we can be responsive to you as families. And we've done the same thing with staff, and we're going to continue to do this. But the idea is that from a responsiveness and also shaping some of the decisions and how things look as we get started, but also recognizing that as we start in September, things are going to change and morph, and hopefully based on the continued feedback that we receive. It's important that you know that we care deeply for kids. We are in the business of kids, and so keeping them safe and healthy is our utmost priority. And the same thing is true for our adults. These are our staff members. So we are working incredibly hard to make sure that they have the best environment possible, the safest environment possible, and that they can do their job, and so that your kids can learn. So we're really committed to that. I also want you to know before we take questions that there are multiple ways and things that will continue. You are going to get a handbook tomorrow that will come out. It is pretty comprehensive, but probably doesn't have everything in it. So we've worked hard to kind of package things so that it's easy for you to use and reference, but recognize that there may be some things that get added. So there may be additional versions. We're going to continue to work on that, but you're going to be getting your first version tomorrow. You'll also be getting your weekly updates from me that provide like updated new information. So you'll be getting those on Fridays. You have a school specific session that will be available for you next week. So there's multiple ways that we want to keep communicating. We want to keep providing you with as much information as possible and also hearing and listening from you. So we really appreciate you participating today or tonight. And if you've got additional questions that weren't answered, please don't hesitate to reach out. Make sure you bring that to your school, but also don't hesitate to reach out to us at the district level as well. We'd be more than happy to talk more with you individually. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike so we can field questions for the remainder of the time.
All right, thanks. Let's go first to Rachel. Rachel, you have a question for us? If you could just unmute your mic. Oh, my mistake. I think I might have remuted you. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Okay. I have a question about the COVID test. If the child is sent home from school by the nurse, if we take them to see the pediatrician, but the pediatrician doesn't think it's COVID and doesn't want to test for COVID, do they then just bring a documentation saying that the pediatrician decided it was not necessary?
That is a great question. So the Department of Health is basically saying that's necessary. And yet we know that that's probably going to be a likely situation where a pediatrician may say that. I think what we would ask you to do is reach out to us. You would be working directly with your nurse. And then what we would probably do is consult with the director or the Department of Health on that individual situation. So I don't have a perfect answer for that. The other thing that I should clarify is if someone refuses, let's just say I refuse, I don't want my child to have a COVID test, that could be, that might happen. And in that case, they would just need to then stay out for a certain amount of days. I need clarification, and I want to actually see it in writing before I actually share that officially, but it's either going to be 10 or 14 days, and then they'd be able to return to school. But your question is a good one, Rachel, and one that I've brought up with the Department of Health as a question to be prepared for in terms of how we work together.
All right, let's go to Irina Strauss. I hope I said that correctly. Irina, you have a question? You can unmute.
Hi, this is Keith. I'm just curious, are the kids going to be issued lockers? And if so, are there guidelines around that?
We're saying no to lockers right away. So lockers for the first 10 weeks, we've basically said, no, we're not even going to issue them. So they'll need to bring a backpack in, and they're going to be transitioning less anyway because of the block scheduling. We're going to reevaluate that though. So what we said is we would do it the first 10 weeks and then we'll see how it goes. If for some reason we feel like we can manage it or that we really need to, we'll consider that for the second quarter.
All right, let's go to Nicole Leonard. Nicole, good evening.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
I just had a question in regards to the training that's going to be available for parents for Seesaw and whatnot. So not all of us, will be home to do the remote learning with our kids. Is there going to be an opportunity for daycare providers or grandparents or anybody else to also watch that training?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we're framing it and designing it with parents for parents. And we're doing that very intentionally because we want to make sure it's meeting the needs of parents. But I know I can speak for all the people who have already been directly connected in terms of the planning that we want to extend that to whoever needs it. Whoever's going to be supporting kids, grandparents, or if it's a daycare provider, we would 100% make that accessible and inclusive.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Earl. Muffin, do you have a question for us?
Hi, yes. I'm just wondering if there will be dedicated teachers for the remote learning students. And if so, do you know the student to teacher ratio?
Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for that either. I feel like I've had a lot of imperfect answers. So right now we're working with the schools because numbers in terms of who has sort of opted out into a full remote have continued to change. Even though we provided a date to let us know by, those numbers have changed even since that sort of cutoff. So what we're working right now with is class lists, and we're also working with schools because in some cases it might make sense, or a team of teachers based on numbers might be able to pull somebody off to do some more just kind of carry and take all the remote kids in that way. But I don't think that's going to work collectively across the board. And in some cases, it's interesting because I talked to a team of teachers just the other day who didn't want that. They wanted to sort of departmentalize their content a little bit differently, and they wanted to work together around posting their stuff and sharing materials. But they didn't want the remote, someone to pull off kids like that. There's a number of sort of pros and cons to both. I'm anticipating that what you'll hear at the school level at those meetings are some of those ideas. And then you'll be getting more information directly from your school around what that team is going to do, whether it be like a third grade team or a fifth grade team. I do know at the secondary, we're not looking at a remote model. We're looking at, so if I'm a chemistry teacher, I'm going to have some of my kids in school, the other ones are going to be hybrid. And then I'm also going to have a group that is just participating in a 100% remote way.
All right, let's go to Brenda Wright. Brenda, do you have a question?
Hi, yes. In regards to parents transporting students in the morning and in the afternoon with drop off and pickup, is there any general ideas that we can expect for what that would look like at a school? Will there be staggered timing for students to come in? And same thing for like a pickup?
Yeah. I'll tell you that it sounds crazy, but that might be the most complicated planning of a lot of this. We've also, there's a lot of parents who are helping us by partnering and driving kids, which is actually helpful for our transportation department. There probably will be a really specific plan for each school, and it's going to look a little different based on the school. So based on how many entrances they have, what their staffing looks like in the morning, so it could be staggered, and it might be using different entrances and so on. I would anticipate it looking a little bit different, or even times varying a little bit than what they typically have. I know that the schools are working really hard on that, and that's some of the information they want to provide you at the individual school meetings.
All right, let's go to Jeremy Frank. Jeremy, do you have a question for us?
Hi, actually, this is Samantha, and I actually have two questions. One is in regards to transportation to Wamoco. My son will be going in the afternoons every other Wednesday, and we don't have school Wednesday, so wasn't sure if they would be provided transportation on Wednesday. And the other question was in regards to food services and using my school bucks. There's a fee currently when you add money online, and I was just wondering if that would be waived this year.
All right, so we'll take both of those. So the answer to your Wednesday question is yes. So we would still be providing transportation for Wamoco. In terms of my school bucks, I'm going to ask Paul to answer that, because I know that you're not the first person. We've got a lot of people who've asked that same question from that vendor that we use. So I'll have him field that.
Thank you. Yes, we have been working with My School Bucks. At this point, we aren't successful in them waiving completely their convenience fee, but they are working on a different fees that would be associated, annual fees that would be discounted, and then also by child. So as much as an annual fee for a single child in the area of only $12. Okay, so we were working with them on that, but we'll also be sending out documentation where there'll be other opportunities for you making deposit into your student's account if you choose not to want to use them. And we're not prepared to share that yet because we've got to work out the bugs, but we'll get something out well before the beginning of the school year for different options for you.
So you can boycott My School Bucks. That makes me mad.
All right. Thanks, Paul. All right, let's go to Carrie Eberhardt. Carrie, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Now the question that I was having, my son is actually a kindergartner, where I'm also going to be watching my niece that is going to be a sixth grader. Now with them, I know they're both going to have the Chromebooks, and I know the first 2 days are remote, and in my niece's case, her first 3 days are remote because she's group 2. Are we going to be receiving like workbooks or textbooks so that they're going to actually have work those first couple days, or is it just going to be something just off the cuff trying to get things done those first couple days?
You won't be getting workbooks. I don't know if Todd, you want to add anything to that, but I don't think we're anticipating sending like paper or anything home on those first couple of days. I think that the idea there would be that there would be like some videos and some like more interactive things to get kids used to and introduced to their particular school. So like, I think the schools are going to be looking at how do they individualize almost like orientations and ways for kids to get connected in and see some of the people and things that they'll be doing at schools. So it'll be, it'll look different and than a typical remote day, just because it's those first 2 days and they're just getting used to things. But it was sort of our way of trying to ease in a little bit and get them familiar with the technology and some of the things that they're going to be using then on a daily basis.
I would agree, Kathy. We are finalizing those plans. And so we will be releasing plans for like Chromebook pickup and what those first couple days might look like. So you will know in advance what to expect by hopefully in the next, before September starts.
So the other thing that I would say, and this goes back to the instructional models piece, that Wednesday, the hope for us is that we're going to be able to provide for parents on Wednesday almost sort of like a schedule or what to expect for the following week. So the teachers who will be working on Wednesday, they'll have that time, but one of the goals would be that on every Wednesday, the third grade team from Lakeshore or whatever school, fill in the blank, provides a communication to families. So in advance, you can sort of a heads up around what's going to be done and what is the week ahead going to look like. That's one of the ways that things are going to be different from this spring. And then that way it helps you to sort of think and prepare, because the reality for this model, there's a lot of onus put on elementary families in terms of how you support your child. We very intentionally did not pick a model where elementary kids are sitting on a Chromebook from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock, because it's not best practice, and it's known not to be very effective. The problem with that, or the hard part for a family, is then you're also having to balance like helping your child and making sure that they're okay with their tech. And so there's a lot of responsibility there that we appreciate. But our hope is that we can help sort of prepare you and give you some information the Wednesday before, so that you feel better about the upcoming week.
All right, we have time for one more question this evening. There's another Brenda on the line that has a question. Brenda? Brenda, if you want to unmute your mic. There you go. All right, let's go to Diana. Diana, are you there? Diana? Okay, let's go to, we have a phone number here. Last 4 digits are 2938. 2938. Can you unmute? There you go. Can we hear you?
Hi, did you just ask for Diana? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Diana, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm driving. So, hi.
Hi.
So, I had a question about, so my son is joining kindergarten, and I've brought this up, and I sort of wanted to make sure if he were to be in the classroom and play with kids, and I logged on a little late, so I don't know if this was addressed or not, but I know you're addressing all the different levels. Like, are kids going to be okay to play and interact still? He's not going to get in trouble for playing with his classmates and friends and being a kid.
Yeah, no, Diana, that's a really good question. I was just sharing, I watched a video today from another district in a different state that really sort of put my mind at ease, like just from an administrator, but also as a parent, around what that could look like. You know, there are going to be things that we do in terms of social distancing and things that we recommend, but kids are kids. Like 5-year-olds are not going to get in trouble. There's a lot of things that we have to teach 5-year-olds and young people. Some of it is going to be how they wear their masks. So when you know, you're thinking about discipline, like that's not going to be harsh. It's going to be very developmentally appropriate. A whole portion of kindergarten is learning how to work together and cooperate. So kids are going to have to work together. Now, that's going to look different, whether they be wearing masks, or in some cases they've got little dividers that they could put up that are clear. But there are definitely going to be ways that we're encouraging kids to interact. And I'm going to tell you right now, knowing our kindergarten staff, we have amazing early childhood educators who value and really understand that importance of socialization. And they will find very safe, appropriate ways for kids to be interacting. I'll post the video that I saw, just because it was cute. Kids were dancing, having fun, giggling, laughing. It felt normal, and they were still wearing a mask, and it was still appropriate. So I have no question that we're going to be able to pull that off in ways that are really good for kids.
All right, everybody, great question to end the night. Thank you all for coming out to our forum this evening. We really appreciate the questions. Make sure to go and register for your school forum next week. And thank you again for coming tonight.
Have a great night, everybody.